everyone, and welcome to our final in the series of Lunch and Learns for getting ready for summer. And today's topic is about for 504s and IEP plans, and looking forward to next year, seeing if maybe you need to tweak those at all, maybe you need to transfer from one to the other, or maybe you think you need to get one in the first place. So hopefully this presentation will help you with that decision. We're going to cover the main points of both types of plans. We won't have the time, unfortunately, to get into specific individual circumstances, but we encourage you and welcome you to call the Utah Parent Center for an individual one-on-one consultation, and then we can address your specific needs. So, oh no, now it's not advancing. There we go. I am Michelle Creek. And I am a parent consultant at the Utah Parent Center. I have 7 children, and the youngest 2 are daughters that we adopted from Russia, and they have some special needs and disabilities, and so both had IEPs throughout their school years. I wish I had known then what I know now about IEPs, because I think that I would have been a much more effective advocate for them if I had. So hopefully we're going to provide you with some information that will allow you to do that. So let's start by talking about the Section 504 plans. The term 504 actually comes from Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. And this is a federal law. It's a civil rights law that prohibits any type of discrimination that's related to a person's disabilities in any type of institution that receives public funding. So that applies to public schools. It also applies to charter schools, and even some private schools if they receive some special federal funding through scholarships or something like that. Section 504 plans are all about equal access to the general education curriculum, just as if they were a non-disabled person. They should have the same access to that educational curriculum. And that doesn't mean just, you know, math, English in the classroom. It also means extracurricular activities, PE, those kinds of things, anything that's part of the general education curriculum. Section 504 says that a student with disabilities needs to have equal access and opportunities to that curriculum. It's really about leveling the playing field. It doesn't guarantee equal results if you have a 504 plan, but what it does is it provides accommodations to level that playing field for people who have special needs so that they can access the educational curriculum just as their peers do. So I don't know if you've ever heard this term before, this acronym called FAPE. It's a pretty important term as far as educational laws for people with disabilities are concerned. What it stands for is a free, appropriate public education. And that is a right of every child with a disability under Section 504. They have this right as a civil right to have access to a free, appropriate for their needs, public education. And the 504 plan is what is supposed to help them achieve that equal access. So then you're probably wondering, how do they determine eligibility for a 504 plan? Well, the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act uses the definition of disability as an individual with a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. So I'd like you to notice that it is a physical or mental impairment. You don't have to have a constellation of them. And it only has to limit one major life activity. Of course, with our children, it's possible that they could have, a whole host of needs that impact their life activities and their education, but the baseline is one. So then we have to discuss what is a major life activity. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just an example of some of the categories and some of the types of activities that if your child had special needs concerning these categories, they could be determined eligible for accommodations under a Section 504 plan. And, again, it's not exhaustive, but I think you can see that it is pretty broad as far as the different domains go. So putting those two together, putting the definition of disability under FAPE together with the major life activities requirement, you can kind of self-check your child's eligibility for a 504 by asking yourself the following questions. Is there a physical or mental disability? If so, does it limit a major life activity? What major life activity does it impact? Does the impairment substantially limit his or her ability to learn or participate in any other major life activity at school? So there are a broad range of needs that our children could have that would make it harder, difficult, sometimes even impossible for them to participate fully in the general educational curriculum. And if that's the case, then it's highly likely that they would be eligible for a 504 plan. There is a link in the chat. Ashley, I didn't introduce Ashley. Ashley Baker is manning our chat and providing links. And she's also here to keep me on the straight and narrow because she knows everything.
I don't, but feel free to check out, anything in the link. So as she's talking, I'm just going to be adding these in for additional resources. You're doing a great job, Michelle.
That's right. The 504 guide should be one of the links that Ashley will add. And in the 504 guide, it discusses more about the life activities and the impacts that different types of disabilities and needs can have on those. So the 504 guide is online.
It's the one I just added. It says equal rights for all students. That's the new one that they revised in 2021.
Yes, it's hot off the press. So. Okay, now this is a major difference between 504s and IEP plans. 504s don't have as structured a process in their development. They don't have as many mandates around who needs to participate. They don't have time limits per se, like the IEP plans do. But best practices, you can look at best practices and kind of follow this process is that this is actually ideally what should happen. So a problem in school or at home is noticed, and this can be by either someone at the school, a teacher, maybe a school psychologist, an administrator. It could be a parent at home. It could be a therapist or a doctor. Someone brings up a concern about the child. So the parent or the teacher then should request a meeting between the two. Again, this doesn't always have to happen that way. There have been 504 plans written where the teacher was the one that brought up the concern, and then the 504 plan was written and the parent didn't have much input. But that is certainly not ideal. And you would hope that you would be allowed as a parent that opportunity for input somewhere in the process. So after that meeting, there's a decision made. Are we going to move forward? Are we going to evaluate? And in a 504 plan, the evaluations can actually be informal. They can be observations that the teacher has made in the class, observations that the parent has made at home. It could be doctor's reports that you have from professionals that you've already been dealing with. It could be grades, just looking at the trend in grades. Those kinds of things, observations and data, can help form the basis for a decision then. Is a 504 plan necessary? And again, if you know the questions that you can ask and answer, then you will probably already have determined if your child needs a 504 and accommodations or not. So once that determination has been made, hopefully based on data, then the 504 team gets together. And again, this is more loosely defined than in an IEP plan, but it should be the people that have the most involvement with the child. So certainly teachers, right, of different topics, the parents, maybe assistant principal, maybe there's a counselor at school that has been involved with the child. So the people who are most involved need to come together in a meeting and decide upon the accommodations and the services that are going to support this child in accessing the educational curriculum the same way as their peers. So when you get to the plan, there is also no standard one size fits all 504 plan. But generally, they should include at least these three elements. They should list the specific accommodations or supports or services that the child will be receiving. They will specify who will be providing these services, and also a person will be assigned to be in charge of that 504 plan. It could be, depending on the school, it could be the assistant principal. It might be somebody at the district if it's a smaller school. And they could be called the case manager, the file holder, the 504 coordinator. But basically, it is whoever is responsible and accountable for seeing that those accommodations are actually provided and that they're provided consistently across the curriculum and faithfully. Now, as a parent, I'm sure you're thinking, well, how do we know? How do we know, since we aren't at school, if those accommodations are really being provided? And Ashley, if she hasn't already, will be also adding a link in the chat to 100 effective accommodations. And that is just a really neat resource to look at if you honestly don't even know where to start with coming up with ideas for what accommodations might help. Take a look at that list, and that might spur some ideas on your part before you go to the meeting to develop this plan. So again, the Section 504 plan doesn't even have to be written, which just seems ridiculous to me, actually. I write everything down, but there's no requirement there. But as a parent, you can request a written copy of whatever the 504 plan is that the team has created. And if, the school doesn't, for some reason, provide you with one, then you can actually create your own documentation around that 504 plan by emailing to all the people that were at the meeting your understanding of the accommodations that were decided upon, who will provide them, and who will be responsible to make sure that they're being implemented. You can write that all down in an email and then send it to the 504 team and ask that if your understanding needs to be corrected on anything, that they reply. And in that way, you can come up with a pretty solid document of what you as a parent can expect to be provided to your child under their 504 plan.
So Michelle, we have about 5 minutes before we want to open up to questions. So
my goodness. All right. My clock disappears too, so.
That's okay. This is a lot of content. You're doing great.
So if you have a 504 plan, this is to help your child access the general education curriculum, typically in the regular classroom, with accommodations and supports provided by the teacher or by the aides in the classroom. But if you have a 504 plan and you've refined it and your child is still struggling, maybe you're thinking about an IEP. Now, an IEP is administered under a different federal law, the IDEA Act, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And what it does is it provides for a specialized education, a customized education that is designed specifically for your child and their needs. So the IEP is the plan that is developed and is the vehicle then for delivering that specialized education to your child. Again, FAPE is a requirement under IEPs as well. And charter schools are also required to follow the IDEA because they receive public funding. IEPs have procedural safeguards that guarantee certain rights to the parent and the child, including access to records, parental consent, and if there are disputes at any point in the process, there's a dispute resolution process for you to resolve those concerns. So the process to getting an IEP looks somewhat like this. It is more structured. A referral is made, and this needs to be done by the parent. The parent needs to request in writing that their child be evaluated for special education services. And then the parent also needs to sign a consent to evaluate. So in our IEP handbook, which Ashley has linked in the chat, there are templates for requesting that evaluation if you need them, but you want to make sure you get it in writing and you've signed the consent, because once you have, then they are obligated to make those evaluations, and they have a 45 school day time limit to do so. And if they decide they aren't going to evaluate, they have to provide you prior written notice telling you why. And then as part of the dispute resolution process, you have other alternatives past that, which are outlined in the handbook for you. So just remember to get that request and that consent in writing. So if your child is determined to be eligible for an IEP, there are 13 categories that they look at, but some of those categories can kind of be a catch-all, like other health impairment, can be ADHD. There are emotional concerns, maybe anxiety, things like that. That's also listed in the handbook. So you want to look at those categories. And then the team will meet to develop the plan. Now the team has to include the parents for an IEP. And if they aren't going to include the parents, again, they have to give you prior written notice, but it is required that they make an attempt to involve the parents in developing this plan. And your child will receive special education services, but that doesn't always mean they're going to be pulled out into a special education classroom, because there's also part of the law that mandates education is provided in the least restrictive environment where your child can be appropriately educated. So they may have general education classes part of the day. Maybe they need an aid in some of those, and maybe they're pulled out for a special education class or two. You as a member of the IEP team can determine how that's going to look. There should be at least one IEP meeting a year, an annual review, and the evaluations need to be done no less than every 3 years. But if something comes up before your annual review, you can request that the IEP team meet again. So, I know that was fast, but if you follow the resources that are linked in the chat, you'll get all kinds of information that we didn't have time to cover today. And again, if you have any questions or specific concerns, you can call for a one-on-one consultation. Let's see, how much time do we have left for questions?
We have a few minutes. It looks like some of the links, I don't know why they are not opening, but please, I'm going to put my email up here really quick so you guys can send me an email so I can forward you all these resources. Okay. It's Ashley at utahparentscenter.org. And I'll get those off to you. And it looks like we do have a question. My 3rd grade child qualified for an IEP about 2 months ago. How does this carry over to her 4th grade year? How will teachers know on one day? And there's more information to address for updating your IEP regarding more social emotional testing. How can we add that to the IEP? Well, those are some really great questions. Do you want to tackle that, Michelle, or do you want me to answer those?
Go ahead, Ashley. I missed part of the first question and only got the last 2. So
yes, so it carries over from year to year. So at the beginning of that school year, the first day that IEP should be in place, and every teacher should have been notified and be given access to the IEP before school starts. I mean, we don't want any surprises, right? So this will carry over to that teacher. If you have any questions, contact your school a week before. Maybe you can get your teacher's email address and let the teacher know if you have any additional concerns or anything like that. Let's see, how will teachers know on day 1? They will know because you have a special education person at your school that will be addressing all of your children's needs and students' needs regarding this. And if you have anything to update, it definitely is something you want to send to the school. They may require a team meeting if things need to be updated on that IEP. So I would be sending it to the school as soon as you can. If you have it now, I would send it to the school now before the summer break.
And Ashley, if partway through the school year, the parent wants maybe additional evaluations that weren't done initially, they can just request those at that time, can't they? They don't have to wait.
Absolutely. Yeah, needs change, right? So what you want to do is make sure you do it in writing. Because it starts, we've got to do that evaluation time, and there are some standards and things according to that. So put it in writing and write down the concerns that you were seeing, and don't ever feel afraid to have that conversation at that lower level with your teacher and see what's going on in the classroom. Absolutely. And you guys can contact us at any time. We do free consultations. We'd be more than happy. Email didn't go through.
Oh, darn.
That is really strange.
I wonder if we can send out in an email to them those links from their registration.
You guys did register. Yeah, we'll figure that out on our end. I'm so sorry. I don't know why that email isn't going through because that's my email.
I know. Are we launching a poll with these?
Yes, we are. So I'm going to throw that through.
Okay.
Some people are saying thank you. Let me launch that through. And if you guys can take just a couple minutes to hurry and fill these 7 questions out, we'd really appreciate that. And yeah, this was really short, quick, little bite of what this whole process is. So feel free to give us a call, and we'd love to help support you. Is there anything else you'd want to address, Michelle?
Oh, my goodness. I'm sure I left some things out, but I do think that if they call with their specific questions, that we'll be able to spend a lot more time with them. And those resources are fantastic. You can find pretty much everything that you need in those, but we know that unique situations come up.
Yes.
Sometimes get calls from parents who their children have had an IEP and now they're being told that they're going to be removed from the IEP and possibly given a 504, and they have concerns around that. We have also parents who call and who have had a 504 but are not happy with the way it's being implemented, and they want to know what their next steps are, or if they really do need an IEP. So there are just all kinds of variables involved with these two plans. And really the best way to answer your questions is for you to call and just tell us what's going on, and then we can address your specific concerns, because they are usually many and varied with all the different schools that we have in Utah.
Yeah, and keep in mind too that a lot of these related services can be met on both plans. So like occupational therapy, speech therapy, transportation, a lot of those things are met on both plans. And I think a lot of parents don't realize that.
Right. And behavioral plans can be a part of these, or they can be standalone if your child's issues are more centered around behavioral. But again, behavior is communication about a need. And so evaluation or observation to find out what that need is, that's resulting in the behavior would be helpful. Also, individual health plans can be part as well. So there are a lot of different things that can be included in an IEP or a 504 as related services, or anything that's necessary, again, for your child to access the educational curriculum with their disabilities, or under an IEP to have that curriculum customized for them so that they can continue to progress and learn along with their unique needs. Has everybody answered the poll, Ashley?
We have 4 out of 7 who have 5 out of 7 now. So we're getting close.
We're getting close. All right.
I love these quick general overviews, but sometimes that leaves you with a lot more questions.
Oh, I know. And each of these subjects has actually been the topic of a webinar. You mentioned we have a webinar just on 504 accommodations, right? On Utah Parent Center YouTube channel. You'll find all kinds of 504 resources and IEP resources there as well, because there really is quite a bit to each one of these topics. But summer is a great time to start thinking about it. If you want to make any changes, if you don't think something's worked, if your child isn't happy with one thing or the next, summer's a good time. And we are here all summer long to kind of put some plans in place so that when those couple of weeks approaching the new school year are here and you can start contacting people, you kind of know what you need to do.
Yes, school shut down, but we do not. So perfect, Alice.
Well, which is only fair because parents are never off duty either. So
True there. Okay, looks like we're just waiting on one more. And yes, if you need to go, great. If you have any other questions, we'll be here a couple more minutes if you'd like to ask anything more specific. Okay, looks like all of the poll is complete. And I think we're good.
okay.
Have a great Wednesday, everyone, and stay tuned for more events that we have on our calendar at utahparentcenter.org. Just click the events section and we'd love to see you join us again. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.